And it's time to kick off week number 2 in college football. We're a day late. Normally we'll be recording this show on Thursdays. But because the NFL kicked off their season on Thursday, we're really not late. So college football, of course, stepped aside. Said it's all NFL. And college football week number 2 will kick off later tonight. We're recording this around 3 o'clock, a little after 3 Eastern. Mark Lawrence, of course, joining me from PlaybookSports.com and also the Playbook Experts YouTube channel. So, Mark, the NFL season has kicked off. I'm sure a lot of fans like that. I think everybody enjoyed that result last night, unless you were a Kansas City fan or if you put a bet on the Chiefs to cover the game. So.
Yeah, I understand. I understand a lot of people. We had talked earlier about the public being in love with Detroit, and then when the injuries came out about Kansas City, it made it very easy for them to get all over that play.
Yeah,
and they delivered the goods to their credit. Now, what I'm going to be anxious to see is how popular Detroit becomes moving forward.
Yep, probably very. So It might screw up the lines for anybody that wants to wager on them, but we'll see. Still, you have to admire how they won, and we'll talk. First, you'll talk a lot NFL, as you will each week on your show that you record on Wednesdays. The show is right now we're posting it on Thursdays, usually by noontime on your channel, so you can check that out. But of course, for anybody that wants to handicap the NFL and also, like we're talking about on this show, college football. Matter of fact, I'll pop up here I think it was this week's edition. I think I have it here somewhere. There it is. Playbook.
There we go.
Issue number 3, volume 38. Actually, let me make sure that you could see that as well. There it is. There it is. Okay, you should see that as well. So there's your playbook, issue number 3. So this $12 thing, is that what it's?
It's $12, the weekly newsletter, correct.
Okay. And you can order that standalone.
Standalone, online, individually, right, at PlaybookSports.com.
And
or save money and get a subscription either way, but you can check it out at the website.
And you guys talk about some of these topics on your podcast. Awesome Angle. Bet you didn't know. You guys did not do this because we'll talk about it in this show. So, and then you guys do give some free picks. Usually have minimum 3 a week, minimum, between college football and the NFL. So, and by the way, this wise guy handicapping contest, I'm nervous. I can't believe I've joined this thing. I hope it's not my thing. Upsets in college football are my thing, so I'm going to have to step up my game. What did you think about my picks this week?
I liked your plays. It's early, tough to tell the first out of the gate situation here, but you're going to see me on an awful lot of underdogs in this contest here.
Really?
I've won it like 4 or 5 times, and it's largely focusing.
How much do you win? I didn't even look at all that stuff.
Well, we've had 50 people in the contest in the past, which means the pool, the kitty, is $10,000, and the winner gets 60% of that. So the winner takes $6,000. This year we fell 3 entries short, so the winner will get $5,700, whatever dollars.
I'm not gonna. I wouldn't care.
I understand.
Yeah. Who needs the extra?
And they play second, third, place, third place, best bet, and there's a final 4 weeks of the contest where people who have the best record in the final 4 weeks, they also can win money as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah. For me, the reasoning was that. I just think the combination of, I just think there's a little bit too much of a distraction going on with the Bills right now, and the Jets. I just think it's one of those games when you are just so wired up, and then you throw in the fact that they're completely healthy, and it's just it's one of those things. And they beat them last year at home, so I just think it's one of the. And again, it doesn't mean they're going to win the division. It's just one game situation. And I just felt that because, as we've talked about before, we try to say this as much as possible on these shows. A handicapping tip I'll always say is that I think the hard part is trying to find situations where you're backing teams that you just know for a fact that they're going to give it, they're giving it their all. That it's they're not going to have to worry about injuries or it's just an off week or so. Not that every time you know that you're going to win, of course, but that's like that's one of those things that you definitely have to make sure that you back a team with if you're going to be limiting it to 2 picks a week. And so that's another reason why I went with the Jets in that one. And with the Jags and the Colts, Jags have got a good defense, and this Anthony Richardson in his first career start, I mean, there's a chance that he could just implode. And I'd be shocked if that was a football game. If that's a football game and he plays well, I think that's great for the NFL, but I'm willing to bet against that.
So. I can understand that completely. I was with you on the Jets as well. I think it's a huge football game for them. And you mentioned about ensuring your team coming to play. The number one game that stands out to me the most of a team that you just knew, absolutely no doubt about it, was going to come and play to win a football game had to be the New Orleans Saints in the game after Hurricane Katrina went through that town. Right? They played like a team possessed in that football game.
That's right.
So if we can have a few more hurricanes, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah. or when the Packers beat the Raiders, Brett Favre's father died.
Yep.
I mean, these are things that you just have to, again, it's not 100%, but you just know that you're going to get that team's best effort. And then you just go from there. But as far as college, we're going to get into I'm going to throw in some of my picks and some of the other things that we're going to talk about each week on the show. But first, let's talk a little bit about what happened last week. Look, the biggest story, without question, was Colorado's win. And I think it's kind of predictable and, I don't know, kind of silly when I see these analysts who want to pick apart the win. And I think those people who pick apart the win, you just know they're anti-Deion Sanders people. And they just, and especially after he talked like he did after the win. And I heard this one guy picked Nebraska to win this week. And he said it was because, well, Colorado, TCU wasn't really, it just shows you that they're not really that good anyway. So, of course, my response is, if I was to interview him, is, oh, well, then I guess you must have made a lot of money on it. If you thought TCU wasn't very good, then I guess you should have took advantage. If you knew that they weren't very good, you should have took advantage of that 6-1 money line. So it's sour grapes by people who just don't like him. And I think there could be a lot of those people this year that if he just keeps winning, I don't know if he will or not. I'm picking him this week to cover, but the more he wins, the more people are going to just really try to find any way possible to just bring him down.
Well, let me say this, about the Colorado football team and what you have going on here this week. A good friend of mine, he hosts a local radio show in Las Vegas, and I've been on it with him for 10 years. And he makes it a point, because it's out west, a lot of the conferences in their early, before the season begins, they do all their press conferences there. So he makes a point to attend all those. And he told me, he says, I was most overly impressed with Deion Sanders' two kids, the two stars on the football team. Is it Shakir Sanders and the kid that plays two ways for them?
Oh, Hunter.
Oh,
that kid is going to be awesome.
He's going to be tremendously awesome. Okay.
Wow.
You can call him Otani.
Yeah, absolutely.
A two-way guy. I don't think he'll play two ways in the pros, but he has the ability for sure to do that.
Yeah, and he needs to relax on playing the two ways all season too. I mean, I know the kid's young, but boy, did he play a lot of snaps.
Yes, he sure did. And it'll catch up with him at the end of the season if it continues. But my point being here is that in the interview, he says he was never more impressed with two more humble, down-to-earth, non-braggadocio athletes than he was when he interviewed his two kids, which sort of really kind of set me back a little bit, growing up with primetime Sanders and all the flash and the dash and, all the picture painting and everything that he does, that his kids were that way, which is really comforting to know, because it doesn't look like they're going to let their heads get in the way of their careers, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think it's also proof. Look, I don't, not that I think we needed it, but because I look, and we'll go into the upset, double digit upset deal later. They were one of mine last week, but it wasn't. And I say this all the time. Sometimes they do these double digit upsets, and I'm not even sure about them myself. But I always say, you know what? If there's a chance, then yeah, that's what they're for. And that's what it was. And I'm not sure I really believed in it. I don't think anybody did until they saw it with their own eyes. That this is this for real or not? Is everything he's doing? How good of a coach is he really? This is the FBS. It's not the FCS. You know, he has a FCS quarterback. He's got FCS players playing for him, and the defending championship game team, even though they lost key players, it's still on the road and all of that. And he still found a way, and it wasn't a fluke. Now, their defense may not be up to par. That's the thing we have to see. But the offense and those kids you mentioned, I mean, those guys are legit. Those are some really good football players, and they're very well coached.
Yes, they sure are. And they have the DNA for sure. So there's a lot to like about some of the talent that's there at Colorado. The one most interesting comment that I read this week about the after effects of the upset last week was there's a popular site called Saturday Down South, and I don't know if you've come
Yes,
across
I've
it.
heard it. Yep.
Yeah, and they do some really nice college football coverage there. And the comment that they made is that if I would have told you at the beginning of the season that after the first week of the season, Colorado would be ranked number 23 in the country ahead of Clemson, you'd have told me I better go see a doctor. Okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened after that win here. They go from a one-win team last year to number 23 in the rankings, and Clemson just barely got the number 25 slot in the AP rankings.
And I think it was maybe an analyst during that game that were talking about, or maybe I heard it from somewhere else, that they were talking about how Dion had to contend with a lot of fans or media in the area that were critical of all of the transfers and all the players he jettisoned from the program and brought new ones in. So, I mean, the first thing I'm thinking about is why they were terrible. That team. Other coaches do it. I mean, Lincoln Riley did it. I can go over 5 or 6 other coaches that I was going over some of this stuff a couple of days ago, and it's just amazing the turnover that you're getting in some of these programs. Don't tell me that he didn't do the right. I mean, I didn't even need to see that performance last week to know that if he's getting rid of that crap that was on that team, that he was doing the right thing. So
yeah, he purged the cancer off that football team, and brought some players in that can play. So job well done. Kudos to him. And he brought an influx of more players in the program than any team did this year
sure.
because of the large amount of turnover that they had. But it looks like he's headed in the right direction. My question to you is, how long will Deion Sanders be the head coach at Colorado?
As long as his son's there, which is not long, I guess, because I don't even know how much more. I don't even know if he has much time left. I don't know what, again, with the rules and how many extra years of eligibility you wind up getting. So I have no idea how that's working. Matter of fact, Mac Brown's pretty pissed off about that as well. So it looks, I mean, at least it looks like he might have at least another year. And I'm not saying that he should all of a sudden go pro. I'm not saying that, but you would think if let's say he's there a couple of years, then I would say at least a couple of years. I don't think he's going
I
anywhere
agree.
as long as his son's there.
And I think that's the linchpin, the reason why,
Yeah.
as long as his kids are with him at the program.
And then if he does really well and he's there for, say, 2 or 3 years, and then his son leaves, then he's going to leave. I don't think there's any. I'd be surprised if he stays. If he does a really good job, because he's going to get some sort of an offer somewhere. The question is going to be, is it going to be in college or is it going to be in the pros? I hope it's in college because I don't think he has the pros. That's a completely different animal. But then again, nobody thought that, this was possible. So first things first, let's make sure that what happened last week wasn't a fluke. Again, offensively, I don't think it is. Defensively, that's the question because they're playing like a Big Ten team now, and Nebraska, they're trying to be tougher. Matt Rule wants them to be tougher. So they're going to try to play smash mouth physical football against Colorado this week. And their defense is going to be better than TCU's. It's going to be a different type of defense. And how does that work? What happens if it's a much lower scoring game, which it might be? How does that work? So, yeah. If I didn't take Colorado last week, and now, how about this? Is if you're advising anybody out there that's thinking of taking Colorado, and again, let's say you didn't take them, would you look at this line this week and say, you know what, I need another week, or would you go, yeah, I don't care that they were a 6-1 money line dog last week and now they're a 3-point favorite. I still think they're a better team than Nebraska from what I saw, and I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that opportunity. Whereas, obviously, if you took Colorado last week, you definitely take them this week. I just think that it's silly not to take them if you took them last week. But how would you advise somebody in that situation?
Well, the point you bring is the big money line dog they were last week, and now they're favored this week. The key fact in that matter is before they played that game last week, they were a 7-point underdog in this game.
Okay, 10-point swing.
Means it's a 10-point swing off of the results last week. And I'm going to just say that, remember, Nebraska is going to improve under Matt Rule. They choked away a game perhaps they should have won, but the key is they should have
won. As
usual.
Yeah. That hasn't changed. Yeah.
He'll get them over that. But, at least they were down on the hunt till the last 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
And the other part of that equation is they outplayed Minnesota. They outstatted and outyarded them. So they weren't pushed around the field. So, everything being what it is here, I'm going to ride with the Huskers and see if they don't bring Colorado back to earth this week.
Yeah, that's they had, I think the quarterback had 3 or 4 interceptions, so he did not play that well. That's the Georgia Tech transfer. So offensively, they just didn't do anything. It was the defense that really kept them in, but then they had the late turnover. And, I mean, if you're a Nebraska fan and you're watching that, I can't imagine. After what they've been through the last few years in blowing games, and then the first game with the new coach, and they blow it the way that they did. Oh, they got to get that stink out of the way quickly. And so maybe this would be the perfect week to do that, because you have to wonder. These are kids at Colorado. You have to wonder, and a couple of guys can sound as professional, because those are the elite players we're talking about. But there's a lot of players on a college football team that are important. And you don't know how many of these guys, they're walking around campus, they're talk of the town, they're the big shots, who knows how many blowjobs they're getting. And I think it's one of those situations that they got to come back down to life. And are they going to be able to do that at home, by the way? They're at home. And so there's a lot of distractions there.
Well, following up on your BJ comment here, I was going to say before you said that, that what Nebraska needs to do is to get that taste out of their mouth. They can't find a way to win. All they do is they just know what losing tastes like.
Yes.
And until they win a football game and turn the corner around, I think there's a possibility that black cloud continues to loom, but that's what Matt Rule is there for.
Yep. Okay, so also, speaking of upsets, we both liked Duke last week. So we took advantage of the points. Could have taken advantage of the money line, but that again was probably asking a little bit too much. So we thought, but not so fast, because Duke actually not only pulls out the upset, but going away in the second half against Clemson, and now you talk about, because we just mentioned all the transfers from some of these schools. Well, Clemson's the exact opposite. And now there's going to be this big outcry. You got to believe, even the fans, as much as they love Dabo there's going to be an outcry of, all right, enough of this. We can't compete in the sport if you aren't going to take in transfers. There's just no way we're going to compete with the rest of college football. But I think more than anything, this is a great deal for Duke, because we loved what we saw from Duke right after their first win of the season last year. We followed them. We were on their side most of the year. We took advantage of those lines last year. We did it again last week. And wow, that is great to see. And these are the things in college football that you do love to see. And what a huge win for that program.
Terrific win for that program here. I think they got a wonderful head coach there. They got a really nice quarterback. And that was a type of a football game that kind of makes a program. They made that upstart season last year. A win like that tells them they're on the right path, and they got to feel really confident here. The question is, where does Clemson go from there? My goodness, I
Yeah.
mean, that might have been the worst game that Clemson's played under Dabo Swinney in my recall.
It's the offense. They don't have any game-breaking receivers. They haven't had that for a few years. Their quarterback play has been bad the last few years, and it's catching up to them. And again, it's look, I understand the philosophy, because as long as you recruit well, if you have good top-ranked recruiting classes, okay. I mean, you can do pretty well with that. I'm not saying that all of a sudden after one game he needs to change his philosophy. But look, the writing has kind of been on the wall for the past few years with the program, and now it's getting to the point where, okay, yeah, it's they've got some holes that they just haven't filled yet at key spots, because the defense is still pretty good.
He's losing out on the recruiting wars that he won so many times before, and that's what really POs him. That and the transfer portal. The transfer portal sort of evened things up, where he had the edge in the recruiting wars, and people weren't allowed to transfer. At least they had to hold back for a year before they could make a move. Well, now it's instantaneous, and he doesn't like that at all, because the scorecard gets evened up here real quick, and I think that's a lot of what they're suffering from.
And by the way, Lincoln Riley's brother, that's a pretty bad debut as an offensive coordinator for Clemson. So it's we got to remember, they've lost their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. They've lost some other assistants. Going down the line, it's the way of the world. And if you don't replace them with really good coaches, and again, it's football. You have to have good quarterback play, and they just have not had good quarterback play since Trevor Lawrence left. So,
unquestionably, DJU, a 5-star recruit, couldn't live up to the billing, and I don't know if any other quarterback is going to live up to that particular billing here. We could see a breakout year by Lawrence in the National Football League this year, and if we do, it's only going to confirm that he was indeed a true 5-star high school quarterback coming to college.
Sticking in the ACC, a huge win for Florida State over LSU. Not surprised that Florida State's a good football team. A little bit surprised about that LSU didn't play up to par. But here lies the problem of these matchups early in the season. Now, next year and moving forward, not a big deal anymore. If I'm a fan and of a football team, and you want to schedule some really big time matchup, first game of the season, go for it. Not going to matter as much. You're going to have 16 teams in the playoffs. You're going to have several at-larges. You'll figure out a way, even if you lose the first game of the season, to make it to the playoffs. But you're still in a situation this year now for LSU that the chances of them now making the playoffs only if they run the table. They still have a shot, obviously, because they're going to be playing some big-time football teams. They're going to be playing Alabama. So, and maybe this is the thing that needed to happen for futures, because they're 35-1 now to win the championship. They were 11-1, I believe, last week. That is a big drop at 35-1. So if you still like them and you were thinking of taking, because I know we did, and if you still like them and thinking of LSU as a Final Four team, and I'm not going to give up on them after one loss, I'm jumping all over that 35-1.
Hey, remember, they lost their season opener last year. They also lost 2 other games last year, yet made the playoffs. So, you don't want to give up on Brian Kelly here just this early on in the football season. And if you're a value player, you got to grab them at the 35-1 this week.
Yeah, that championship game loss to Georgia last year was really not that bad, considering how good Georgia was and LSU going into it. But again, the fact that they were able to beat Alabama and find a way after losing to Florida State and Tennessee early on in the year, and put themselves in a position that if they would have beaten Georgia in the SEC championship game, that they would have I can't imagine, even though TCU did have the loss. So I would have thought that if LSU would have upset Georgia in that championship game, LSU would have been in the playoffs and not TCU. So The fact that they did get that far, like you said, even with 2 losses, shows you that, yes, I think you'd be a fool if you liked LSU last week and you don't like them this week. That's ridiculous. So, also, as far as last week, just a couple of quick things. I'm going to move on to this week and a few other things I want to talk about, but that is a couple of other games out west I just want to bring up. One was the Washington win over Boise. Now, I'm not sold yet on Washington's defense. We'll see. I mean, again, the Pac-12, do they have the defense when it comes to it? But offensively, wow. I mean, in the first game of a season against a quality football program, that offense was amazing. Penix is a true Heisman contender and a true NFL prospect, and they're a dangerous team right now to keep an eye on. That was a very impressive win.
Very impressive win. I was most impressed myself. You don't find Boise State going down that hard that often, and I'm going to be curious as to whether or not they can bounce back here in their home opener this week.
Yep,
they're a home underdog, and they've won their home opener 21 years in a row.
Which is, by the way, the incredible stat of the week.
There we go. Nice segue. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Because Gus Malzahn, he's chomping at the bit to prove to everybody just how good Central Florida is now that they're in the Big 12, and they're going to be a dangerous Big 12 team. So keep an eye on that matchup for sure. The thing I'm interested in though is that Boise did not give up anything on the ground against Washington. It was all through the air. I think Washington had barely like 4 yards an average on the ground. I bring that up because Central Florida wants to run the football. It's all about running the football with that offense. So if Boise, and this is the interesting thing, by the way, about trying not to get carried away early on in the season with matchups, because we don't know. Maybe Boise State's an awesome run defensive team, but they got no secondary. And so they matched up against Washington with this explosive passing attack. But now they're going to play Central Florida, who can only run the ball. And maybe their run defense will stop Central Florida, and they'll beat Central Florida, and they'll go, you see, we're not as bad as you think. It was just a bad matchup. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying that this is what happens early on in the season when you're trying to. That's why it takes sometimes half a season, especially in the NFL, before you really try to figure out, all right, what do we got going on here with these teams?
Unquestionably, and that's what these early games in the month of September are all about. Is figuring that matrix out, finding out what the strengths and the real weaknesses of these football teams are. I'm going to say this while we're talking about Washington, because we're not going to get to their sister team in the state, Washington State. But in the playbook,
well, actually, we will in a little while.
Okay, well, I'm going to save this comment, okay? Because it's a pretty neat one, okay?
But the last one, before we do talk about this week and a few other things, is that the one team that we, again, both like a lot, I believe Craig Bohl is one of the more underrated head coaches, especially in Group of Five, and that is Wyoming's upset over Texas Tech. And we know how good Texas Tech is. Again, same thing. Don't just forget about Texas Tech because they lost to Wyoming. That's a good Texas Tech football team. And this Wyoming team now looks better than what they were last year. The quarterback plays a little bit better, but the defense is always good. They can run the ball. And they were down 17-0 after the first quarter as a 2-touchdown underdog. And you just felt, all right, that's it, game over. Look how good Texas Tech is. They're just way too good. And Wyoming found a way to win that football game in overtime. That was just a tremendous. That's one of the best wins I think they've had, maybe since Josh Allen's been there.
I agree with you, and I'm really high on this Texas Tech football team. I think they're a nice comeback play this week against a very fat Oregon Duck football team who put up 81 points against a high school team last week.
There you go. So before we move on with these games, we have a segment that I want to throw in there and get Mark's opinion on. We're going to start, first of all, with the Heisman. So, matter of fact, on the screen, what I could do is, because we've got the odds on the Heisman. Actually, you know what? Since I've got the futures up, let's start with the futures. So let me go ahead and I'll post. You can see that those are the futures at DraftKings.com. And then I'm going to go ahead and post up my bargain future plays. And these are 6 teams that I believe, based on the odds, If you would like to invest in futures, these are the 6 that I point out that I think you could take advantage while the number is there. You got Penn State, Notre Dame, LSU, Oregon, Oklahoma, and Kansas State. So out of those 6 teams, and I'm going to take LSU out of the equation because we just talked about them, we both like them, and it would be too easy of an answer for you. But out of the other 5 teams, which one would interest you the most?
Well, because I've got an extra win chip in my belt, and I think this football team might be sneaky good this year, I would bite at 28-1 with Notre Dame. Uh, I don't think they're going to have. They're not. It's not like they're going to go into conference play and they're going to meet some really rugged conference opponents here. They still got a couple of tough customers to take care of, but the point being here is this: when you break down all of the other teams, Kansas State's got to get through the Big 12. Uh, Oregon, the Pac-12. We talked about LSU, Penn State, the Big 12, the Big 10. If I didn't do Notre Dame and I had to do a team out of a conference, it would be Oklahoma. And it's because I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite in the Big 12 conference this year. The Sooners really impressed last year, and they are on what I call a mission this year,
Sure.
football season here. That losing season last year usually gets those teams inspired the next year. So my answer to this is I would first buy Oklahoma at 50-1, and then I would play a little bit of Notre Dame at 28-1.
Yeah, Notre Dame can, and they do have a tough schedule this year. Taking a look at it, even this week's a tough game. They have 4. Well, you know what? One of them is not as tough as we thought, and that's at Clemson. So, you might look at, and this is why I never will look at schedules and go, well, let me predict records on schedules because things change every year. For instance, we have no idea how good, say, Pitt will be late in the season when Pitt goes to Notre Dame. They could be real good. I did not consider the Duke game on the road as one of those top 4 games. Now, I would switch it, that maybe Duke is the tougher road game than Clemson. But then you also have Ohio State at home, which is just nuts how big that is, and USC at home. I mean, those are as tough. I mean, there are people that would normally, if you're predicting playoff teams this year, I think you got a lot of people picking Ohio State and USC to be in playoffs. And Notre Dame's got to play both of them.
Yep.
So that's a very tough schedule. But that's probably also why they're 28-1.
Well, look at the Oklahoma schedule. It's not anywhere near as tough because they're playing other fellow Big 12 teams, of which, like I said, there is no stick out inside the Big 12 conference this year. I don't think there's a team that I would bet to win the Big 12 that I would feel really comfortable about when I went to bed tonight.
Yeah, they do not have any, like this week's game against SMU is going to be their toughest non-conference game.
Right.
So, and look, I don't blame any of these Big 12 teams. I don't know. You got to schedule in advance. But the way that this whole thing is going with these influx of teams into the conference, you don't want to have any additional tough games out of conference because your schedule, it just got tougher because these teams that came in are good. These are good teams that are coming into their conference. So yeah, I mean, they still have to play Texas, obviously, Central Florida, on the road with Kansas, rivalry with Oklahoma State. Who knows how BYU is going to be? TCU at home, but that's actually not all that bad of a schedule. Like you said, that's not bad. That's a schedule you can run the table with. So, all right, let's then go next with the Heisman. So we're gonna pop that off and let me get the Heisman bargains in there. So I've got a list of 7, and out of those 7, which ones would you go after? As I'm also going to post up the Heisman numbers, the overall Heisman numbers, which of course Caleb Williams is still in the lead at about 5-1. So out of those 7.
Out of those 7, I would go after Sam Hartman, the great grandson of Mary Hartman.
Notre Dame and Sam Hartman. I like that parlay. Maybe you put that together and make about $5,000.
Yep, I think he's going to put some big numbers up for that program this year. And if Notre Dame does pull an upset or 2 along the way, knocks off one of the big boys, I think it vaults him right near the top. So there's that possibility does exist with him at that particular price. And I don't know Blake Corum, as good as he is, I don't know, honestly, if we're going to get a running back that is going to be in the running for a Heisman Trophy.
Sure.
Although there's one that I did bet a running back.
You
Uh,
did?
oh yes,
That's 50 to
yes I
1.
did. I don't see him anywhere on your list.
That's
He's
actually it's on the bottom right there. Oh, he's not on. You can't see him on the screen. Okay, wait.
no,
There he is on
yeah,
the
but
bottom.
he's in the bottom of my list, okay, or
Yeah,
on my sheet.
he's right
Anyway,
here. This guy right here from Ole Miss,
there you go,
50 to 1.
Kashawn Judkins,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, he's going to be a really
Freshman
good
ran for
player.
almost 1,600 yards last year, 16 touchdowns,
Yep.
over 5.5 yards a carry. He got out to a little bit of a slow start last week for Ole Miss. Carried it 13 times for only 60 yards, but he did find the end zone twice. And he's just waiting to go off. He's is about as extremely confident in his ability as anybody that I've seen in a long, long time. So if he gets going here, look out. He could be like a loose cannon. And all you have to do is have him in the top three going into the final month of the season to find out. So at 50 to 1, I put a shekel or two on him.
By the way, as far as Corum, the reason why I think Corum's a good play is because last year I actually thought Corum was going to win the Heisman until he got hurt. I think the injury that's it. It was over. He was on his way to the Heisman, and then he got hurt.
Yes.
And that opened the door for Caleb Williams to win it. But so now you all of a sudden you give me 40 to 1? Wait a second. He was just on his way to win the Heisman last year, and you're giving me 40 to 1? So, yeah, I mean, he's off of an injury, so I don't know how that's going to hurt him. Does he have that? Does his body healthy where he can rip off those big runs in key games, the Heisman type kind of clips, things of that nature? But Judkins, Corum, the difference is those guys, unless they run for, over 2,000 yards, that kind of thing, and put up just record-breaking rushing numbers, they have to be in a situation where they're playing for a national championship. And that's where Corum was last year. Now, Ole Miss has got the talent. There ain't no question about that. They're in the SEC. They might even be good at sleeper, speaking of transfer teams. So I think that's the reason, by the way, why you're getting these odds on some of these running backs because of that. But I think Corum is somebody that definitely sticks out for me because of that. Okay. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to knock this off the screen, is we are going to talk about the key games coming up this week. And I'm going to start, first of all, with a player that was on that list at 100 to 1 as far as the Heisman's mark. And it's a team that, again, I mean, if you want to talk about some teams that Mark and I have been all over for the past couple of years, you got Oregon State, Wyoming, Duke, and this team. And this is one of them, Kansas. And Jalon Daniels did not play last week for Kansas, and they were fine. Their offense can still work pretty well without him. But he was a phenomenal talent last year, and he was a big reason why Kansas had a great breakout year. He got injured late, didn't play as much late down the stretch. They lost a few games. I think a lot of people just dismissed Kansas the way they ended the season last season. And that's good for Mark and me. We both appreciate the media giving up on Kansas because that puts Kansas back into the situation where we like as they're just Kansas. But they had that really big-time game in the Liberty Bowl where they put up over 50. I think they lost that game to Arkansas, I believe. But it was an exciting game, and Daniels did play in that game, and he had over 500 yards of total offense and 5 touchdowns. That's the last time we've seen him. He was a little bit injured. This is not same injury, I believe, but he was a little bit injured before the game last week, so they kept him out. Why not? You're playing an FCS team, doesn't matter. But he's supposed to play this week. They're a 3-point favorite against Illinois. Yes, Illinois barely won last week against a MAC team. But as we all know, that's the best MAC team there is right now, Toledo. It's not a pushover game. I'm not trying to diss Illinois here. But Illinois had some key losses, quarterback, running back. They still put up some pretty good points. But I'm not saying that this line should be 7 or anything like that. I think the line's about right, but I just think Kansas is a better team right now than Illinois in this spot. If it's in Illinois, all right, maybe we'll talk. But we're in Kansas, and of course, anytime we're in this situation, we're going to bring up the fact that Lance Leipold is now 26-10-1 against the spread at home as an FBS head coach, and 2-0 straight up and against the spread as a home favorite with Kansas, which happened last year. And they're in the spot once again. And that's why, with Daniels coming back, I'm all over Kansas in the game tonight against Illinois.
Well, Leipold at home and against the right teams is like giving a loaded gun to Alec Baldwin. You know he's going to go off. He's a terrific head coach. He very seldom ever does get outcoached. I'm not a big Brett Bielema fan by any way, shape,
No,
or
you
form.
are not.
No, not at all. And I think this is an ideal spot for him. Number one, he's got the spotlight on him tonight, Friday night. Only game on the FBS level that they're playing.
Yep.
So yet to them, that those kids, it's like being in a Monday night NFL football game.
Yep.
Because all the peers are going to be watching him in the contest here. But I'm with you. I like this Kansas football team real well. They were the number one team. Now we've hit on this in our podcast before, in the country in overall returning production ranking.
There you go.
Yep, number one. So they've got a lot of depth, a lot of experience, and they got a really good head coach.
So we're in agreement there. By the way, Illinois did lose the yardage battle last week to Toledo in that game.
Yes.
And they gave up about almost 200 yards of rushing offense against Toledo. Again, good team, but it's MAC. Now it's Big 12, and we just told you about their explosive offense. So Illinois is going to have to score points. Kansas, the defense is still not where they need it to be a legitimate Big 12 contender. But the offense is as good as any team in the Big 12. So could be a high-scoring, exciting football game. And that's probably what we're expecting. What I'm going to quickly do before we move on is right now I'm going to show everybody. Let's see. This is I'm just showing everybody the picks. My record from last year, my picks formula, my record this year. The picks are on the board right there. And my upset specials are on the board as well. So now everybody can see what I'm going after.
Hey, Greg, before you do that, can I just make one more comment about the games that are on the under the radar list, if I may?
Oh, you want to go into that list right now? The under the radar list. We can do that, sure.
Well, is that where we were when we were talking about Kansas and
I was just
Illinois?
bringing it up because it was the Friday game, but it is in our list. No, it's in our list, so let's go ahead and talk about it. I'm going to pop that up right now.
Okay.
All right, there's our under the radar list. I forget, I didn't even count that. There's probably about 12 or 15 games that I think are games that are the best games this week that may not get the recognition that they deserve.
Well, to me, the one that stands out is Wisconsin at Washington State, with Luke Fickell taking over that Wisconsin football program. I think they're going to be very, very good and a very, very under the radar type football team because of the neighborhood they live. You got the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Penn States, all in the Big Ten Conference here. But I think Wisconsin is going to really make a name for themselves this year. And I think we had what was the best line in the Playbook Football Newsletter this week when one of our college football writers, when he opened up the write-up and he says, if this game took place in 2024, it would be the Big 18 against the Pac-2.
Oh, my Lord. Yeah, that's not going to work out. I don't know what that's about. I know. They're going to have to figure out a place to play. But, yeah, this is a rematch, of course. Different coaching staff, a lot of player movement. Washington State pulled off the upset last year. They were a 17-point dog. They won the game outright. And this is now year 2 for Jake Dickert, the head coach of Washington State. I remember we talked in our preview show last year. Washington State was one of your sleeper teams, and they actually came out of the gates and proved that with that win at Wisconsin. Let's keep this in mind. Now, this is, again, an interesting in this offseason, everybody's talking about Wisconsin's passing offense. They've got this high-flying offensive coordinator, and they've got the new quarterback from SMU and Oklahoma who knows how to throw the football, and Fickell is in town, and he's bringing this high-flying passing offense. Well, the high flying passing offense against a mediocre MAC team didn't fare very well. 189 yards for Mordecai, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. What won it for them was the running game. They ran for 314 yards. Malusi and Allen, Braylon Allen is another running back with a Heisman possibility. They both combined for like incredible numbers. So that right there is why. And by the way, Washington State's not a bad rush defensive team, and maybe that's part of the reason that they were able to be able to upset Wisconsin last year. But the reason I'm picking Washington State in this one is just that, look, Washington State won last year. They've got the same coaching staff. Wisconsin's got a new staff. They're trying to put these schemes together. The passing game hasn't clicked yet. Now they got to go on the road. Washington State's probably feeling disrespected. We just beat this team last year. You were the underdog again. So all that kind of stuff matters more in college than the NFL. So that's the reason I'm going with it. Not because I'm like totally sold that Washington State's like a better team or that they'll win this game outright, definitely. But it's just these are the kind of upsets that I think can happen this early in the season.
Well, riding a Pac-12 conference that is 13-0 this year, I guess, that's a good horse to get on for sure.
For now,
right,
early, because if you look at one of those others, like let's see, how about UCLA? Because I'm just taking a look at our under the radar games, and UCLA's at San Diego State. They got this 5-star quarterback that played pretty well, and they didn't cover against Coastal, but they beat him. And that game was a lot closer. Matter of fact, there was a turnover pretty late. I think, but called for an interception inside the 10-yard line, or Coastal could have taken the lead against UCLA. But then after that, UCLA was a couple scores, game over. Of course, UCLA lost some key players from last year's team, including the quarterback. But the 5-star quarterback played pretty well. But now he's got to go on the road. And San Diego State, really good defensive team program. Not that they've looked very well this year, because San Diego State doesn't look all that great. But then again, they never really look all that great under Brady Hoke. But, they can win football games. So I'm not saying they're going to win this game, but it is a 15-point game, which is why I'm taking the Aztecs. But that's another under-the-radar game that may be a pretty good one to watch late night Saturday.
I think it'll be a real good watch late night Saturday. It's San Diego State's salivating for this game here, taking on one of the Pac-12 name schools. This could really be a big, big boost for that San Diego State program if they can pull the rug on UCLA.
Were there any other games in that list that intrigue you the most? Keeping in mind Air Force at Sam Houston. This is the FBS home opener for Sam Houston. We know they did not score a point last week at BYU. I don't know what happened there. 14-0 BYU, and now they have to play Air Force defense. So that may not. So, but again, it is their FBS opener, so it's going to be you would think the environment. But there's another game I think that does interest you for sure, and that is App State and North Carolina.
Absolutely.
That line has gone up now to 19. It just keeps climbing. And I think the reason it's climbing is because I think a lot of people are paying attention to, and this is just my guess, that North Carolina has a lot of returning players from last year's team. Appalachian State has a lot of key guys that left the program, graduated, whatever, transferred, things of that nature. I'm thinking maybe that's because I otherwise I don't understand. It was a 63-61 game last year. And App State, once again, has proven that they could be a big-time dog team. They've covered 9 out of 10 as a dog. This is all they do. They upset A&M last year. They upset North Carolina in 2019, even though they almost beat them again last year in another upset. But what's also interesting is the fact that it looks like Mac Brown, I thought it was going to happen last year, but now I think it's happening. He's starting to get better defensive players at North Carolina. I couldn't imagine this was going to go on too much longer without him realizing that if I'm going to boost this program up, we have to play defense. And so they had 9 sacks last week. So this is a step up, though, of course, potentially, because I have no idea how good South Carolina is, even though I thought they were a pretty good football team. But App State, this is a spot that they've been historically good at, and it just looks like people are just forgetting about that.
Yeah, it's the little red-headed stepchild in the state taking on the big brother, and you almost always get good efforts from them, just like App State gave last year against North Carolina. that game went back and forth at that 63-61 final. App State kept North Carolina would score and pull away. App State would score and come back, but they'd go for two and miss. Same thing. They scored again against North Carolina, went for two and missed. I think that is going to set real hard on this App State football team. They're going to watch that game film over and over and over. And I think you're going to find a very pumped up Mountain Men football team taking on North Carolina here. That's the game, Greg, that when you talk about your potential upsets that could possibly happen at big prices, and we're going to get to those, that's a game I would have on my list.
Yep, they are right now 6-1 at least. It might be higher now, so there might be as high as 650-1 as a money line dog in that one. So yeah, definitely that is one that you just, because what if App State wins this game and you don't go that way? You're gonna go, how can I mean, the writing was on the wall. How could I have not seen it? So there are sometimes you just have to play these ones, even if you don't really feel it. I mean, that's why it's not on my list, but I'll do it. It's like I'll probably even do as a parlay. I'll probably do, okay, I'll do App State parlay like a buck or two with a game I really like that'll play later that night, or maybe an NFL game. So if they win, I can try and take advantage of that. And as far as on that list, also Arizona, Mississippi State, Auburn, Cal. You've got this Pac-12 SEC deal going on, and I think those are interesting because of that. Arizona, you know where I stand with Arizona. Jed Fish, they haven't broken down that door yet. They haven't had that upset yet. And the thing about Mississippi State is, with Leach and him passing away, and they gave the job to the interim, I'm not so sure that was the right thing to do. There's no way that this coach, I mean, the only reason he got the job is because basically wrong place, right place, whatever you want to say it, wrong, right time. And then he won the bowl game and they gave him the job. So I think the coaching advantage for me goes to Jed Fish. Mississippi State is a really good quarterback, a really good running back. But again, the thing I was a little bit bothered by, to tell you the truth, is I was a little bit surprised that Arizona was getting this much respect. That's what bothered me a little bit. I was like, why aren't they like a 17-point dog? They were a 17-point dog at home last year. Now it's a 9 or 10-point line, and they're going to go to Mississippi State. That surprised me a little.
Well, it's largely because of the Mike Leach situation. You know, what happened, unfortunately, passing and not being there for the program. It doesn't carry that same weight, that same persona this program does. So you're going to come up short in the number here until they can prove that they can be any semblance of a team like they were under Leach. I don't know if they're going to, but they're going to have to prove that before they start laying big wood like they did last year.
All right, and then the other game that I do like as an upset, no, actually I have him as a 4-star, and that's Cal getting 7 against Auburn. We know Hugh Freeze is a good coach; he's going to get it right there. But new coach, changing things around. Second game, go out west. They've only been a road favorite one time since 2020. And they lost that game straight up and against the spread. So they haven't been in this spot very often. And again, that's why they have a new coach. But Cal, you know what? We've talked about Justin Wilcox, and he's a good coach, and we like him. But the offense has been so bad there. You know what? I think this could be the year it changes. They've got this Jake Spividal coach back. He was the guy that was there as an assistant under Sonny Dykes when they had that explosive offensive team at Cal. Spividal got the head coaching job at Texas State. Didn't work out. I've got an opening. Okay, we're going to bring you over here back to Cal as our offensive coordinator. So far, so good. Because I don't want anybody to tell me, oh, Cal, what did they score last week? Like 52 points or something like that. They scored 58 points, beating North Texas, 58-21. And it's 669 yards of total offense. I don't want anybody telling me, oh, that's North Texas. Cal, last year, the last few years, they couldn't do that against the North Texases of the world. No. Their offense was so bad. So that offense, by the way, very good running back. That kid Ott, very underrated running back. They got a good receiver in Hunter. They got the North Carolina State transfer quarterback Finley as their quarterback. So they've got an offense now to go along with the defense that's better than last year's defense. And we like Wilcox in this spot. He's covered 9 straight as a non-conference dog. and he's 5-1. Last 6 against the spread as a home dog. And I just think this is a really good spot. Like I said, another thing, I'm going against a new coach, second week, trying to figure things out against a team that is, I think, maybe on the rise, and people should maybe keep an eye on.
I agree 100%. I checked every box that you talked about there, and I think the hiring of Spividal is key to this football program because they needed a shot in the arm offensively, and it appears they have that.
Other games in there, Cincy at Pitt. Don't know what Satterfield is going to do with this program because there's a lot of changeover. So I'm intrigued on how that's going to work out. Iowa State. How could you not be intrigued by this rivalry, especially with all the gambling stuff going on there? Unfortunately, Iowa State lost their quarterback over it, but that's always an interesting game to watch, that rivalry. Of course, game 2 for McNamara, the quarterback for Iowa.
You know, there was a nice comment written in our magazine about this particular game. In fact, the guy that wrote it up in the offseason, he had to go get a root canal. And he was told by his dentist, who's a big football fan from Iowa, to make sure he watches this football game this week.
Okay.
And he asked the dentist, can I schedule another root canal Saturday instead?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, those games have not been historically beauties.
No.
By the way, Iowa lost the yardage battle last week to Utah State. Now, I don't know if that's going to tell us that Utah State's a better team than we're thinking about, or that once again Iowa's offense, even with McNamara at quarterback, is just not going to be all that great again. But again, Iowa State without their quarterback, we'll see whether or not this redshirt freshman, who had a pretty good opening last week, because I actually think Iowa State's going to be a little bit better this year.
I do too.
Yeah, I think you just can't. I mean, Matt Campbell's too good of a coach, and sooner or later they're going to start playing better football. Ole Miss and Tulane. This is another really good under the radar game because Tulane proved last week. Remember, we were doing the preview. All right, Tulane probably going to be down. They lost a lot of key players, but the one thing we said they did not lose was their quarterback. The kid Pratt coming back. They got those receivers, and he had a huge game. They lit it up against a quality South Alabama football team, you know, one of the best in the Sun Belt. We know how good the Sun Belt is. And so now all of a sudden you look at this Tulane program, they ended the season strong. They beat USC. They come out of the gates. They beat a quality team to start the season when people thought that the line was pretty small considering that they were at home. And now they take on an Ole Miss team, and it's a 7-point spread. I mean, it's a little bit lower than I would like to take to go with Tulane, but the fact is when I looked at the one number for Ole Miss that really stood out, they're 4-24-2 as a road favorite of 16 or less. That is a huge number that I was able to get right here in the Playbook magazine for 2023, which you could still get, and we have the link in the description area. It's not too late to get this magazine because it has all these awesome trends and stats that'll help you win this year in college and pro football. So that's one of the trends that really stood out for me. And then considering Tulane lost by 40 when they went to Oxford in 21, you kind of know that this is one that they really want bad.
I agree with you on this game as well. Mississippi's going to probably be a better than average team in the SEC, but there are flat spots. And this could well be that flat spot. Tulane didn't get a whole lot of love for what they did last year. They were simply the most improved team in college football. They went from 2 wins to 12 last year, but didn't get a lot of love at the beginning of this football season. So, they showed everybody that, hey, that wasn't a fluke last year. We are indeed this Tulane football team you saw last year. I agree with you. I think there's an upset in the making here.
And then the other games, just going to run through. You have SMU, Oklahoma. Big opportunity for us to see whether or not last week was just one of those blowouts. Who knows if Butch Jones is on his way out at Arkansas State? We have no idea. But that was some performance by Oklahoma. But SMU, Lashley seems like he's did. I mean, boy, did he bring in a lot of transfers. So it looks like SMU might be better. Remember, I mentioned to you in the preview they got that quarterback that they really like, and he got off to a good start. So that could be an exciting game to watch. Stanford at USC. I put that on the list because I'm interested to see where is Stanford right now? Was the coaching change necessary, and are they going to be different? So that's all. I was intrigued. I want to see, because Stanford upset USC, by the way, 2 years ago in this spot as a huge dog. So, but Lincoln Riley, things are a lot different. Troy at Kansas State. You got one of the best Sun Belt teams in college football on the road against K State, the Big 12 champ. So that's an intriguing game for me as well. So those are all the under the radar games that I wanted to highlight. And now let's talk about the big games this week. And we're going to start with Alabama and Texas is the biggest one of all. And this is the one everybody wants to see. Alabama's a 7-point favorite. I was a little bit surprised to see that they were only a 7-point favorite. Steve Sarkisian, I'm not the biggest Steve Sarkisian fan. I still have to see it to believe it. I don't think it's going to work. I just don't. I mean, and I'm all for Texas and these other big college football programs, even Nebraska. I want to see the big programs succeed. And I just don't think, I know Sarkisian's a great recruiter, but I just don't think the guy's a very good head coach. I just don't.
Well, what he also happens to be is another former assistant of Nick Saban's, and we all know how he plays against former assistants, especially while not laying double digits in games like this. This is an Alabama football team I think is going to make a lot of noise this season. I think he's playing with a big, huge chip on his shoulder, is Nick Saban here, and I think he wins this game comfortably.
Yeah, that's why I was that's my 5-star of the week. I'm in a situation where I'm going to be, okay, I got to win by more than one score. And I'm Alabama and I'm at home. They're 14-3-1 in their last 18 against the spread as a home favorite. I mean, that's a big number. Meanwhile, Sarkisian, okay, in the 4 years, I mean, in the 4 spots like this under Steve Sarkisian, when Texas is a road dog, 0-4, straight up and against the spread. Okay, so right there. Oh, and by the way, in the 2 years under Steve Sarkisian, Texas 0-2 straight up and against the spread in road openers. So nice little
Too
combination.
much love for Texas, not enough for Alabama. That's what this game is.
Also, as far as big matchups, definitely to talk about, you have, and again, this might be a game that would have been better or could still be good, real good, if Miami's going to be better than we. And again, another program it would be good if they were, but it's only a 3-point spread. I'm just not really a Jimbo Fisher believer as well. Otherwise, I would have jumped all over Texas A&M in this spot. I still think this is the way to go. I'm going to pick them. Because I wasn't thrilled by what I saw last week from Miami. But I just don't know. I don't know what to expect from Miami year two, other than they better be better. I think they will be, but I just don't know what Texas A&M is either right now.
Well, the last 5 times that Miami's been a non-conference home dog, they've won and covered all 5 of those football games.
Yep.
And they're playing with some big ugliness of a chip on their shoulder from last year. They were the worst team in college football against the spread, and I think they're going to come back mightily the other way, that way this week. But I think one other thing that works in their favor, aside from revenge from last year, is the fact that you have to remember this is going to be played Saturday afternoon. It's very hot, very humid
Yep.
down here. And much like the Dolphins when they play their NFL games on early Sunday afternoons, I think that same thing might wear Texas A&M down here on Saturday as well. So I'll be with Miami looking for the upset here.
All right. You touched up on it before, Oregon and Texas Tech. I just couldn't take this game either way because of the fact that Oregon, this line, I think is just a little bit too high for me. It's whatever, close to 7, 6.5, 7. But Oregon was a playoff team pick for me. So that's kind of why I had to stay away from it, because I'm like, I like Oregon, but I just don't know if I really like them as a 7-point favorite at Texas Tech. I'm not giving up on Texas Tech because they lost to a team that we both like in Wyoming. Texas Tech 2-0 straight up and against the spread as a home dog last year under McGuire, first year head coach. This is his second year. And they upset Texas and Oklahoma last year in this spot. That's as good as it gets for a Texas Tech program in the Big 12. You're putting them in that spot again. And for Oregon, yeah, they put up big points. We knew that. We know they're really good. I mentioned Bo Nix on the Heisman thing at 16-1. I think he's going to have a tremendous year. But it's just a lot of points for me to be giving up in this spot.
Well, you find in Texas Tech a formula that works really, really well, and that's a winning team that got upset on the road as a favorite, and they come back as a home dog, and especially when they out-yarded their opponent in that loss.
Okay.
That's oftentimes overlooked by if not the odds maker, at least the public for sure. And then you bring Oregon in here off that 81-point win over that high school we talked about earlier.
Yep.
I think it's a real nice spot for Texas Tech in this contest.
Then there's that other game that also is going to be a little confusing for me to figure out, and that is going to be the Utah game against Baylor, because we didn't really touch up on it. But what a huge upset for Texas State last week against Baylor. But you know what? I just don't look at that game as, oh yeah, that was one of those just crazy like weird upsets. Yeah, like Middle Tennessee beating Miami, but they're really not all that good. Um, I look at it as, you know what? I think Texas State might be better than people think. They're not playing for playoffs and they're not doing anything great, but they've got players. And Baylor, I don't know what happened there other than I would just think that maybe they were overlooking the first game to the second game. That we don't care. We're going to beat this team easy, but we're worried about that Utah team coming in next week. That's what we're looking at. The quarterback's out now for Baylor, so that's also come into play. But here's the other thing. Rising didn't play last week, and Utah really didn't. I mean, they made a play or two. Other than that, their offense did pretty much nothing last week against Florida. Florida outgained Utah last week, but they were without Rising, and they were without the tight end, who I haven't heard whether he's going to play this week or not. And he's the best receiver Utah has. So this is just another weird spot for me. What do you have a feel for this game?
Well, I love the situational set to Baylor in the game, given the fact that Utah uh, played a big football game last week with a football team that was really, really injured.
And
Uh,
revenge.
and revenge. So they picked up a revenge win. Now they're going to go on the road here against a team that was thoroughly red-faced embarrassed. In fact, it was the biggest loss in college football to the spread. They were a 29-point dog. They lost right here in their home field. My goodness, they'll still find bloodletting all over the field. They're going to have to do a nice job cleaning this field up here. But everything I'm reading here about this game, they lose Shapen. Baylor loses their quarterback.
Yep.
Cameron Rising, everything I'm reading, he's going to play. He's been practicing.
Yep.
And Utah's also getting a lot of other players back here, too.
Maybe, yeah.
So suddenly you're taking one team who's really going to improve off the MASH unit and putting another team on the MASH unit here. I would love to be all over Baylor, and I would be if
Shapen was playing at least.
I'm sorry?
If Shapen was playing at least, I might be. Yeah.
He's ruled out.
Yeah.
So I can't go there with the backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And the kid didn't look good at all last week.
No.
Yeah. He had 2 turnovers in the last 2 drives against Texas State. So, and Utah is one of the best defenses in the country.
Yes, they do.
And now, if you want to take Baylor and throwing all the other stuff out from Playbook Magazine, Baylor has covered 8 straight at home after a double-digit straight-up loss as a favorite. So that's the big number. And keep in mind, Utah has dropped 3 straight road openers.
Yep.
So, again, that's why I'm just staying away from the game in general. I'll watch it and I'll see what happens overall. And then the final game before we get into the upsets is North Carolina and Notre Dame. And this is a game that you actually had as one of your top games this week, didn't you?
NC
or do you
State
have
over
a top
Notre Dame,
trend
yes,
or stat, Mark?
Yeah, we have it as an upset special.
You do?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Notre Dame and North Carolina State. And why specifically that? Because when I looked at it, there were some things that pointed to Notre Dame, and that was specifically the fact that they have owned the ACC teams. They've won 14 straight on the road versus ACC teams. Have covered 11 of those 14. They're also 11-4 against the spread. Their last 15 as a road favorite, and they've covered 8 out of 9 versus the ACC the last 2 years. But there are some positive stats trends the opposite way, including the fact that North Carolina State has covered 9 straight after a non-conference game, taking on an opponent coming off back-to-back straight-up wins. And NC State has covered their last 3 as a home dog. And they've won 2 of them. And that's the direction you're going with the outright upset.
They've also won their home opener 12 years in a row, which I like. I like taking teams like that are cast into underdog roles, and we're talking more than a touchdown underdog role. They're going to bring Notre Dame in here off back-to-back wins, 25 or more points in each win. it's very difficult to continue that onslaught 3 weeks in a row to open the season, especially on the road against a good quality football team here. I like Dave Dorn as a head coach real well. And we also have inside of our what we call the clincher inside this game in this week's football newsletter, and it pertains to road favorites in Game 3 who come off back-to-back wins of those 25 or more, like I just mentioned.
Okay.
They're just 12 and 27 against the spread, with a lot of other tighteners in there. One being that if your opponent allows 20 or fewer points, a pretty good defensive team that slips to 4 and 19 against the spread. This is the spot, Greg, that upsets occur, and I think it will with NC State over Notre Dame on Saturday.
Yeah, and Brennan Armstrong. Now, the passing game did not break out against UConn, but Armstrong was able to run the ball a little bit, and we have no idea of what they were also going to use this week as opposed to the UConn road opener. But Armstrong nearly ran for over 100 yards. He ran for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. But we also have to remember that he has his offensive coordinator with him, who was with him those 2 years. He broke out passing the ball for Virginia. They're reunited, and so you would think eventually, could be this week, that he's going to start opening it up in the passing game. So we'll keep an eye, obviously, on that one, which is an early game. I believe that's a noon start at NC State. Now we're going to wrap it up with my upset plays of the week, and each week I'm going to ask Mark to pick one of those that he likes the most, and I'm going to flash it on the screen one more time. See right there, you see in the bottom right, those are the double-digit upset specials. I hit one of them last week, and again, my philosophy, as you can see in the top left, my points formula, my philosophy is, and it worked last week, if I can hit that 5-1 or 6-1 game, like I did with Colorado, I can lose the 3 others, and I'm still coming out ahead. And this is why I love double-digit upset plays in college football. But obviously, you got to hit them. I remember last year I had like 2 straight weeks of 0-4s. So I think I probably lost like about $1,400 in my bank for going 0-4 for 2 straight weeks. But again, another tip in handicapping, if you believe in your formula, you just keep sticking with it, and you don't go turning and twisting and guessing, and you just stick with it, and it should turn around. So out of those 4 games, Mark, which one do you like the most? And again, they are Texas State, FIU, Jacksonville State, and Eastern Michigan.
Well, if we're going in, let's go all in. Okay, let's go all in with Eastern Michigan.
All right, I kind of knew you'd do that. Yes.
All right.
Here's another one of our boys, Chris Creighton.
Yep. Chris Creighton, number 1. They got off to a nice start, albeit against Howard last week. Minnesota had that phony win, if you will, last week against Nebraska, where they got outstatted in the football game. And I think they could easily play down to the level of Eastern Michigan. I think Minnesota's an overrated football team this year. These are the kind of games that make a season for a team like Eastern Michigan. The other game I was this close to mentioning, but much, much more value to Eastern Michigan, was FIU against North Texas.
Yep.
And if for no other reason, FIU is supposed to be a much improved football team this year. They didn't show it last week, but they do have some experience coming back here. And North Texas was just slaughtered in the stats in that California game. They allowed over 600 yards in the contest. I don't know if they're ready to lay points in a game like this yet. So that would be my consideration play. But I'll make Eastern Michigan that play on the double-digit upset special.
Yeah, they also give us maybe the trends of the week, because Chris Creighton and this program, 26-7 against the spread, the last 33 as road dogs. And that included last year, and we also include bowl games as away road dogs. They had the bowl win last year, and that was at the end of the season. They ended their season, I believe, 5-0 straight up and against the spread last year as road dogs. Nobody does that unless you're like, because if you're a dog on the road, you're not usually a very good team. But they won all 5. I think they started off with a loss, but I think they won their last 5 maybe. And that included.
Those are great indicators, Greg, by the way. A team that closes out like that.
Yes.
They're confident. They remember what they did, and they're just jonesing for more when they come back.
One of them was, I said, the bowl win. The other one, they won at Arizona State early in the season as a 20-point dog. And let's also remember, Minnesota, lost to Bowling Green in 2021 at home as a 31-point home favorite. And in the last 2 years, Minnesota has had 4 upsets at home. So and I'm talking like 6, 7 points or more, where they've been a favorite and they've lost 4 of those. Now they've won some, but they've lost 4 of them. So
Yeah, you get the rug pulled out on you 4 times, it makes you a little bit dubious. You wonder when the next left hook is coming, you know.
And like you said, they sure didn't look all that great offensively. They weren't all that great offensively last year. You take Mo Ibrahim out of that lineup at that big time running back, and now they're throwing the ball more. The kid threw the ball 44 times against Nebraska, and they averaged 4.5 yards of reception. That's terrible.
Dink and dunk.
Yep. So he's look, it's an 8-1 money line. But obviously we love the points because it's 21. But why not roll the dice on that? And by the way, you mentioned the FIU North Texas one. Eric Morris is the new head coach in North Texas. So again, another situation where you have a new head coach. He's changing systems. They didn't look very good, as you said last week, with the new change. They have an inexperienced new quarterback. And FIU looked awful. The first game against Louisiana Tech, that was a game on television on week 0. Their quarterback was so bad. He threw for 4 yards. 4 yards in the first game. Okay? So what did McIntyre do? What he has to do. He took him out, and he inserted a true freshman quarterback by the name of Keone Jenkins. And Keone Jenkins is a high 3-star who had an Auburn offer. Went to FIU. He played at Miami Central High. And he was the senior quarterback for their 4th straight state championship when they went 14-0. Wow. He made his first start last week, played an FCS team, and his numbers were he was a high over 200, close to 300 yards passing, I believe. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Completely different than the numbers from the 4-yard guy in the first game. So, yeah, that's the reason why I jumped on this. Remember, it's Mike McIntyre. It's year 2 for FIU, and we know that there's probably no better program rebuilder. And he's done it at spots that nobody thought he would do it at, and that's Mike McIntyre.
Mike McIntyre. And remember that name, Keone. What was it, Keone? What, Jenkins?
Jenkins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll remember that name for sure.
Yeah. And then the other 2 that I had, as you know, I'm a big Coastal guy. Love the quarterback. Talked about how they actually gave UCLA a tough one. But Coastal just won 6-1 against the spread. Their last 8 is a home favorite. And Jacksonville State, head coach, you know who their head coach is, Jacksonville State, now that they're an FBS team?
Is that Rich Rod?
That's Rich Rod.
Yep.
So again, they have stability. Don't forget, new coach for Coastal, Tim Beck, never been a head coach before. So it's his first home game as a head coach. So I just figured, you know what? Jacksonville State was a really good program in the FCS. They have a lot of players that were back from their team the last year or 2. And so I figured I'll take a chance there. And then the last one on my list is Texas State. And as I mentioned before, I think they're interesting enough that they're not getting any respect whatsoever for upsetting Baylor at Baylor. And I don't think UTSA, we're big UTSA guys too. We really love the job being done there by that program. But they just did not look good. I mean, Harris threw 3 interceptions against Houston. They just looked really out of place. I was very disappointed by the UTSA in that matchup. And I think you were disappointed in them as well.
I was. I think that was a case where they didn't lose to Houston. They beat themselves. And a little bit unusual for a Jeff Traylor type football team.
Yep.
I don't think they'll come up with 2 bad performances in a row, but you never know. Maybe there's something missing at the program. So
you don't know. And G.J. Kinney is in his second game as a head coach, top assistant. So great first start. And by the way, their quarterback was a starting quarterback at Auburn. So this guy played SEC football and sure looked good under G.J. Kinney. In the upset against Baylor. So definitely one of the spots where if they wind up winning again and you don't take him, you're going to be like, well, they just beat Baylor last week. Well, why wouldn't I think that they'd be a good upset pick this week? Anyway, so that's going to wrap it up, Mark. Appreciate it. We are going to be back again mostly on Thursdays. So check back with us on Thursdays when we post these shows. You can check the description area of the show where we're going to be able to put the links in there, and you can be able to check it out, including how to purchase not only the newsletter. Again, I'm going to pop that up here once again. Here's the newsletter. Right here that you can get for $12 each, or you get in a package deal for the entire season, but also the playbook guide. This is NFL and college football. So you can't go throughout a season. If you are a real serious somebody that tries to make money on handicapping NFL and college football games, and you don't have the newsletter, I mean, you have to invest. If you don't invest, and I don't even know what you're trying to do, but if you're going to invest a few bucks a year on it, then this is how you invest. You invest with the magazine and the weekly newsletter. So there you go. Check it out. And Mark, of course, check his show out on the Playbook Experts YouTube channel every Wednesday, or right now we've been posting them. We're recording them on Wednesdays and posting them by around noontime on Thursdays. And that's an all-star lineup. And if you're big into the Las Vegas contest scene, super contest scene, Andy Isco is on the show each week, giving you updates on that. And of course, Victor is Mr. He's got to come up with a nickname. You know, the totals over under. He's got to come up with a really good nickname for Victor. I know he's got the King Creole nickname, but I'd like to come up with something that suits his handicapping style.
Well, I'll tell him that because King Creole is his love for Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something he'll find out about Elvis Presley and totals. We'll find out. Okay?
Something like that. Maybe there's a song in there somewhere.
Right.
With Elvis Presley totals, and see what we can come up with. So, Mark, I appreciate it as always.
Good show as always, Greg. I enjoy doing it. Look forward to coming back and doing it again next week. Have a great week.